Hello, good morning. Another wet day. I think we've got that for a few days this week for sure, with all I think they call it low pressure that's causing around the area of Manila and the northern parts of Luzon. Haven't seen so much rain for so long. But my thought for the day comes from the one that I did yesterday. It's more an important issue that I think it's overlooked here. We as foreigners, of course, um, come across building overseas, and I think we can all understand the reasons why certain things are done. In Australia, we have termites, the same as here in the Philippines, and you have to realise that termites not only crawl, they fly. In New Zealand, we have a thing called borer, again very much like termites. It bores by the name. They bore their way through lumber, through timber. And in New Zealand, Pinus radiata is used to build the framing in many homes. Before that, often kauri was used. It's a very exotic timber. In fact, it's protected now in the sense that just like Nara is over here, it's a very hard wood, but nevertheless it's susceptible. People think that just because it's hard, borer or termites won't get into it, and that's not true. Yes, it's a bit like saying, well, trying to eat your meal with false teeth it makes life difficult, but it's not impossible if you're hungry. And borer and termites eventually will seek out food. That's what their purpose in life is. And doing so, they leave the eggs behind as well. But moving on from that is that nowadays a lot of the new construction around the world is done in steel. And there's a logical reason for that. One is because it's designed structurally to be as strong, if not stronger, than that of timber. It's not as flexible as natural timbers, but it is nevertheless a certain amount of flexibility. Hence, sometimes it has to be braced either with a flat piece of steel or a strong piece of bracing plywood, which is again provided as bracing plywood. It's not just plywood. It's been built and laminated together to provide that purpose. So not all plywood is bracing, but it's of course an opportunity to at least attempt to do it, and often covered then with plasterboard as a finishing coat. Here in the Philippines, of course, traditionally it's always hollow blocks or lumber. There's no sort of in between. Of course, you could add bamboo as well, but we all know that bamboo is a very strong form of material. I won't say timber because it's not really timber. Bamboo is, in fact, a plant, unlike a tree. Of course, a tree is a plant, but the strength is in the trunk and the branches. In the bamboo, it's the fact that it's created round, and it has little sections in it as it grows to a long length. But it's amazingly strong and flexible. It's used a lot in floors overseas. Bamboo floors are extremely tough and durable surface. Again, we're moving away from the purpose of the video. I suppose fundamentally I'll stick to just four of the items that I think are important. One, insulation. Two, foundation. Um, Three, choice of material. And four will be avoiding termites or also damp. The first one, of course, is when you build a house, a lot of builders over here or people in construction naturally believe that they've got the techniques that work here. And that's true, they do work. You dig a hole, you look for as firm a surface as possible. They often go down to clay. Now, clay is not always the best point of building a foundation, but if that's the only firm surface, what they then do is they create in a sense, a pad. You put gravel down there just to stop really effectively the concrete that you're going to pour on top of the rebar mesh that you will tie together. You'll just tie them all together and there'll be basically a 1.2 square, in other words, a 4-foot square pad. Now built into that is an L-shaped piece of rebar, which then again is tied to that pad. And initially, the first stage is to pour about a foot, at least a foot or 18 inches of solid concrete into that hole. Generally speaking, they're at least a metre, depending on, of course, a soil test. And I think that is an area that a lot of people forget. A lot of the homes that they build here are on previously agricultural land, and the history of agriculture is that things have been grown there, whether it's water from fed into to feed rice plants or just to soak down so that they can grow corn. Either one it shows there's a lot of topsoil. When you do dig down, you'll find that most of the time you'll find at least a foot to 18 inches of topsoil, sometimes even deeper, depending on the area. So you want to know a little bit about the history of the land. Has it been flooded? Does it flood every year when the big floods come? They'll have an influence, at least in your own mind, when you come to think about how much it's going to cost you to put a good solid footing down. Now those footings with a pillar are built with rebar, and try not to under supply the rebar, because that's the essential insurance you have of stability in your building. Some people might say, 18 is okay. But if the engineer is asking for 20, stick to the engineer's recommendation. Don't try cutting corners, because even though you might think, well, it saved you a few thousand pesos for each piece, in the end, it might cause you problems long term. And after all, you won't be there to fix them. Now, once you've got the footing in, you then form up to the ground level and just above. You pour the form in. You pour the form up with concrete, which gives you a pillar. Now, before you can carry on there, you have to backfill it. It's not about the land settling, it's just about getting a firm surface for which you then connect all of those pillars with what is called a ring beam, which is basically about a square foot, like that, all the way around, connecting all the way around to each of those pillars, crisscrossed and all the way around. Now from that, you can either add to the top of that, in a sense, a mesh created out by a smaller, probably 12 millimeters is often the one chosen and recommended for the flooring. Now, this is where the problem in the future can happen. Over here, when we do tiling, they use an old traditional way, which is putting a screed down on a rough surface of concrete flooring. And even though that's okay, we're in an area, we call it the Ring of Fire. So it's very much like New Zealand. And you have to think about the kinds of ways of affixing your tiling to the floor. Here they tend to just put a screed, in a sense. Your floor is just a rough pour. They don't polish it off, they don't float it off level. So you end up with a rough surface for which then you put a mortar on top and then you put the glue on top of the mortar to hold the tiles. In some cases you're lucky and it holds, but before that ever happened, you have to think about these things. Why do they in the West put a damp course underneath? In other words, a black plastic sheeting joined together with an adhesive tape over the whole area where you're going to put your floor. Now, there's a reason for that, because it stops the damp coming up out of the ground. And we live in the tropics here. And when you think of the cost of a roll of black plastic, reasonably heavy gauge, you have to remember that that's good insurance. We don't have insurance on houses here. It's very hard to find anybody who could give it to you, let alone pay out if there was a problem later on. So you have to be proactive. Sometimes there's a need to get the building up quickly, and really running down to the hardware store and buying sheets of a membrane of plastic sometimes is the last thing that the locals will think about. The way to do it is to put a thin layer, maybe an inch or 2 inches across the whole area of your finished surface before you put your floor down, of river sand or just plain fine sand. When you do that, the reason for that is it stops anything that's below it, like a stone, from working its way up through into the plastic. So you put your plastic down, you roll it out, it's not a problem. You tell the guys to maybe walk on it with a piece of plywood while they're doing the job so that you don't put pressure on it. There's a tendency also here to put a stone underneath that mesh. And I think the cost of a few little of those little plastic, we'll call them turrets, that you can sit the floor Rio bar on, maybe 2 inches above what you're planning to build or lay down your floor, is a good investment. Again, you can buy these things on Lazada if you can't get it in a local hardware store. So it's not a problem. You can't say, it's all about planning. You might say, well, it's a lot of effort and extra, I can't be bothered. Well, be it in the end, that's your problem that will happen in the future, that you'll probably kick yourself that you didn't do. Now, once you've done that, you've got a good surface for the concrete to be poured. Now, okay, you can float that floor. We used to watch the Armstrong family, and they did it the right way. They used what I call a helicopter. It's like 4 paddles on a motor, and you go over it like a floor polisher, and it polishes off the surface. It brings your surface to a good, smooth surface. Now, you can use lasers, you can use string lines, whatever you use, as long as you make it flat. Now, by being flat, there's 2 things that happen. You don't need to overcoat it or screed across in a 2-inch or 1.5 inches of fine sand and cement. You can actually use your adhesive straight onto it. Now, also, if you go to Wilcon, you can buy fully flexible cement or tile adhesive from them. Yes, it can be expensive, but it's not expensive when you consider the cost that you're putting in, buying the tiles, paying the labor, and finding that your floor then starts to lift in a year or so because you've had a bit of a rumble. Well, I think it's good investment myself. A lot of guys who do tiling all the time, they don't use trowels with notches in them. You can get a 12mm trowel, which is 12 millimeters, square little turrets along the thing. And that's ample to use to get a good base. It also means that you can use these modern technologies. There's little plastic things that slip in between the tile. They go underneath the tile and you can screw them down so that you have the effect of lifting the tile to a level. So you can keep all your tiles level. You might say, well, that's a lot of expense to go to, but they again here tend to butt the tiles up to each other. Problem there is that when you do get any movement, where can it go? It can't go anywhere. It just starts to push up, and that's where you get the drummy sound that you can feel on the tiles, which means that the tiles are no longer holding to the floor. But by using proper flexible glue, and when I say it's flexible, it's like a rubber additive that's put to the sand and cement, and it gives a certain amount of jolt, shock. But it really does. I used to use the expression, it sticks like shit to a blanket. Sorry about it, but that's what it does. It's extremely hard to get a tile off the ground when you do that. In fact, in most cases, you have to smash the tile up. Now, hence the problem. If you do have a problem in the future, please make sure that you buy at least 1 or 2 boxes in addition to a big area of flooring. Even in the bathroom, make sure you save at least 4 or 5 tiles. You never know when you might have to replace a wall tile as well. That comes from many years of doing tiling, where people will ring you up and say, what can I do? Well, if you can't find the right color, white is a terrible thing. As much as it looks nice in the shower, the problem with white, and especially if it's got a design on it, how do you fix that problem in the future if you do? Well, if you're lucky, you can talk the customer into taking out all of those around in one line where there was a problem and make a decor tile to fix the problem. But again, what happens if you have another one? You're going to have black and white and all whatever colors up the wall. So keep some spare. Have them stacked away somewhere. Probably the best way is to put a bit of plywood in the roof cavity over a wall. So that, in other words, it doesn't just go straight down if it does fall. Put it on a piece of plywood over the top of the wall and stack them evenly so that they don't topple over. But have them there, knowing that that's where you kept them. Again, just a little tip. Now, the other thing, of course, is you fix the damp. You found the glue that'll fix the tiles into place. The other one, of course, is lumber, timber door frames. On the outside, look good, but really, is it a good idea? You can still put the timber if you really wanted. Say you have a really decorative front door and you want to make it look as original as possible, and you maybe have a door surround that is also in lumber, in the same timber, then make sure that the actual frame itself is a steel frame. When you do that, it means that you're going to stop the chance of borer, or should I say termites, coming and visiting you. They'll still get into the door surround outside. Don't think for a minute it doesn't. When it's wet, you often see them flying around. They don't like getting their house wet, and that's where they start flying around. And they'll just walk underneath any door into your home. You'll find that early in the morning, all the half-dead termites, they're trying to lose their wings so they can walk their way to your nice kitchen cabinets and things like that. So putting in a steel door frame, they're around, like I said before, they're around 2,500 to 3,000, and they're made. Get the heavier gauge ones. Don't go for the cheap 1,500. They're no good because they're poor quality steel. But if you get the other one, which is a heavier one, it's installed the same way. It's often welded to pieces that come in your door opening, as well as filled up with concrete, so they can't go anywhere. And a good builder will make sure it's plumb and level enough to hold your door, so it doesn't look like it's twisted. Now, coming into it, of course, you make sure that don't put lumber in your ceiling if you can help it. because you're just waiting, 5, 10 years down the track, you're going to need to completely rebuild your roof and everything else. It doesn't matter how much coating of chemicals that you put in the lumber, sooner or later they're going to like the taste and they're going to keep coming back. And steel is much stronger. It's going to be more durable in the long run. So get your architect to design a simple ceiling. It doesn't matter if it's a rake ceiling and you decide to put a ceiling lower, flat, because that then again, don't do it in timber. Don't encourage them to use timber, because steel is so much easier to work with. If you look back on some of the videos that I've done here, way back, how to install ceiling, you'll see how I've done it. And I just used logic to put it together. There's no set way. Whatever suits you and you achieve the same end, which is a strong framework to put your plasterboard ceiling or your cement board up there. Again, use no more nails behind the surface when you put it up, because it not only will help the ceiling be stronger, it'll ensure that the ceiling doesn't necessarily going to fall on your head in one big clunk. It'll be gypsum board is the best one to go to. Get a nice smooth surface, and it's easy to plaster. I think the last thing to remember is insulation. So many people just think, oh well, we'll put aircon in here and we won't bother with insulation. There's two kinds of insulation, the ultimate choice, and one is, like I explained, it's a sisolation. It's a reinforced, we'll call it oven, aluminium sheeting, and that's exactly what it is. When I say it's reinforced, it's got fiberglass glued between it like a sandwich. It's usually double-sided, so you not only have the radiated heat coming up, is not building up there, the one coming down from the steel is also not cooking you down below. And it's laid gently over the rafters, and then the iron is screwed down on top. And of course, being screwed down, going through what is basically aluminium paper, is much better than using the more local one that is used, which has got, in a sense, foam rubber between two surfaces of aluminium foil. And again, like I said, once you squeeze it together between your rafter and your steel roofing, what you're doing is you're squashing it and you're baking it. So really, in a sense, you're weakening the hold that you've got with that. And with any wind coming in underneath from the eaves, even if you have the eaves filled in, which most homes have, wind does come underneath, and it will eventually slowly wear that down, and you'll look up in the roof one day and see that it's hanging down, so it's defeating the object. So those are the biggest things that I think you need to consider. Overall, when you look at a house, if you have those things in mind, maybe you're adding $1,000, maybe $1,500 to the whole cost of building a home. But think how much that has the effect of providing you with a form of insurance on your home for the future. Not only yours, but for your loved ones that you leave behind. You don't want to leave those headaches for them. So that's my thought for today. It's a bit like a DIY show, but I hope it helps everybody when they're planning their home here. It can be an enjoyable task, and knowing that you've done your best to ensure that the home will last a little longer. Anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And if you feel like helping the channel out, there's a note there in the description. Bye now.